What is up, everybody? Tech Chucker here, and today we're going to do another review of the Hasbro Marvel Legends Captain America Civil War Wave Iron Man Mark 46. Now, in the package, this figure looks really cool. I was actually really excited about grabbing this one, especially because of the power flame effects that we get with this figure. But then when I opened him up, I now understand why people are complaining about this figure. Again, it looks really cool, but let's crack this thing open and take a look at all the problems that we are going to experience. Right off the bat, articulation is kind of what has killed it for me on this figure. Aesthetically, he looks really, really good, but articulation-wise, it is terrible. So let's start off with the head. He is on a ball peg with a hinge, and right off the bat here, oh, popping the head off there. He's able to look up enough. I wish he could have looked up a little bit higher. That would be much better, especially try and get this stupid head back on. There we go. I would expect him to be able to look up a little bit better so that you can get those flying poses. But he can look up that much. He can look down really well. He can get his chin into his chest, which is good. And then he's got good side-to-side action, so no surprises there. And then he's got just a tiny little bit of tilt within his head. I wish that he could have had that a little bit better. In the shoulders, he's got a ball joint and a hinge, and it is terrible. He does have full rotation of his arms. He's got a upper bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, which work barely. Let's see here. Yeah, not so great. I mean, he gets about 90 degrees. I would have expected a little bit better. There is a peg joint and then a hinge in his wrists, and he can curl forward fairly well. Curling back is a little bit harder because of the armor plates on the top of his wrists. So the arms I'm not super happy with, but in the upper torso, he's got a double ball peg in the upper torso, and he can't really crunch forward much, and backwards arch is okay. But I certainly would have expected a little bit more. He does have full rotation of the torso, and then just a little bit of crunch, side crunch, which is actually kind of nice. It works fairly well, I have to give it that. But moving into the hips, he's got T-jointed ball joints in the hips, and he barely can get those legs apart. I know that this is, it's his armor, and he's not really going to be able to be moving that much, but I would expect a little bit better for splits and a lot better for forward kick. That's all he can do, and he can barely get his leg back at all. I mean, this is just terrible. And he does have an upper thigh swivel, which works well, and it looks decent enough. And if you kind of twist the leg, you can get it moving forward a little bit more, but it just doesn't look right. He's got double jointed knees, which work really well. He's able to bend those legs up pretty much all the way in half. And then there is down in the ankle, he can move his foot back just about as much as we'd like. Forward, almost nothing. And then there is an ankle rocker, which works fairly well. So overall, I'm really disappointed in the articulation, especially because some of the sculpt is what's causing the poor articulation. In the arms and shoulders, it's those shoulder pads that are causing his arms to not be able to move out very much. In the hips, it's the sculpt of the armor on the top of his thigh that's causing him to not be able to kick forward very much. He's not able to do the splits hardly at all, which I get. This is his armor. He's not going to be super flexible in it, but I would expect that it would be a little bit better than this. Aside from the issues that the sculpt causes the articulation, I do think that aesthetically this thing looks really nice. I like the sculpt work on the face. I can't remember if this is a new sculpt for the helmet or not, But either way, it's really nice. There's nice details on the face. You can see in the cheek jaw area that little indented spot where then they've painted it silver. So I think that looks really good. I like the plates on the shoulder, even though they do cause some articulation issues, and I like the actual shoulder piece. That looks good. I wish that it was more of a floating piece of armor on those shoulders. That might have helped. The hands are sculpted really, really well. I think these just look so cool, and especially where the accessories peg in. I think they just did a really, really superb job on the hands. I think I just have no complaints with that. Moving into the rest of the figure, I think they did a good job. I do think that the torso, especially the lower torso area, is a little too small. I think that the legs should be a little bit bulkier, at least the upper thighs, maybe not the lower legs, because I think those are probably the right size. It just seems that the thighs are a little too thin. But overall, there's a lot of really good detail on this figure. I Some of it, going back to just the size, I think the lower torso needs to be bigger. I think the hips need to be a little bigger. Here's a comparison of him next to Havoc. And this is why I kind of feel like he needs to be just a little bit thicker because he's covered in armor. You can look at these thighs. Iron Man's thighs are smaller than Havoc's, and Havoc is basically wearing tights. So that's why I feel like those thighs are just way too small. And maybe if those thighs and hips were a little bigger, then maybe I wouldn't have a problem with his lower torso being so thin. But those are my gripes with this figure. But in the end, I think the sculpt is one of the stronger points on this figure. I like the paint on this figure. I think they did a pretty good, solid job on the paint scheme. I really like the colors, the tones, the face. They did a pretty decent job painting this figure. So you can see the gold is pretty strong and cleanly done. The eyes are actually painted fairly well. I like, as I noted in the sculpt area, I like the jaws where they kind of painted that little silver bit in the indentation. It could stand to have a little bit of a black wash to give it a little bit more of a shading look, but throughout the figure they've painted a lot of the different sculpted areas. Some areas definitely are not as cleanly painted. I like the chest area where they've got the little blue ring around the white center. It's a little messy, and you can see right here on the gold there's some paint missing where you can see the red shining through. So throughout there are some paint issues, but overall I think they did a really, really strong job painting this figure, where a lot of the figures that they do, they don't put nearly as much paint on them. So I think with that in mind, I think Hasbro did a pretty darn good job on this figure, especially considering how little thought they put into the articulation. They did a good job with the paint. Now, on the back, of course, and this is where some of that shading would help. There's a lot of sculpt work that is essentially just forgotten, and a lot that is just really messy. But again, I'm going to come back to, I'm still pretty darn happy with it because I think this figure looks really good. It looks good just standing on my shelf. Obviously, if you're going to look a little closer, you're going to start noticing all of those problems. But paint is certainly not the low point on this particular figure. So I'm still quite happy with it. Accessory wise, I'm not super impressed with this figure, but it's not terrible. Now he comes with two sets of hands. He comes with these fist hands, which are actually painted and sculpted really, really well. I think they look really nice. The paint is fairly clean on them. I do think that it would have been nice if the little palm areas were painted differently than the red. So I do like those hands. He comes with the splayed out hands as well for, the shooting. I don't know. I guess the pulse, whatever that's called. And then he comes with these really cool kind of iridescent iridescent, is that a word? Translucent, that's the word I'm looking for. These bluish translucent power effects, which are actually really cool looking. They look really, really nice. They're painted really well. So in that respect, I'm super happy with how these turned out, and they just peg into the bottoms of his hands that are open. And so I can't complain about those. They even peg into his feet, so you could make it look as though uh, he's got the power effect coming out of his feet. Now, I don't know if that's intended. It's not really placed in the right spot for that, but it's really cool. Now, with that look, obviously, you kind of want to have four of them, so that way then you can have all of them powering up. So he can either be shooting a blast at you, or he can be getting ready to take off. So I'm happy with the accessories. I do wish that we would have gotten an alternate head. We just get the masked head. So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence whether or not I'm super happy with the accessories we got. All right, folks, so originally when I first bought this figure, before I opened it up, I was super excited about it. I thought, man, this is going to be that one Iron Man figure that was going to be super cool. It was going to be great. It was going to be everything I wanted it to be. And then I opened it, and it's not. It's just like all the other Iron Men that they seem to be putting out. The articulation is pretty terrible. The sculpt is okay, and I talked about the sculpt being pretty darn good. It is pretty good, but I do wish that it was a little bit better. The paint could certainly be much better, and it wouldn't likely take that much to do it. Is this a must-have? I definitely would say it's not a must-have. If you want to Build-A-Figure Giant Man, yeah, you're going to need to get this one, and you should be able to get it fairly cheap. I don't think this one's going to be difficult to find, even a year after the wave has been released. So maybe go get it. Maybe just see if you can buy the BAF. I don't know. It's up to you. I I'm happy I have it, but it certainly is not going to be my favorite Iron Man at all. All right, folks, so make sure you stay tuned for more. Hit subscribe, like me on Facebook, and I will see you later.
Tetris Brain Blast.